Hi, everybody. It's Susan, and I'm back to talk about the Aquarius full moon and lots more. As you can see, if you're looking at the screen, there's a lot to talk about at this Aquarius full moon. The day before this full moon, there is an event that a lot of people are talking about, which some people call the Lionsgate 8-8, etc. If you want to know more about what I think about that event, you can watch all the way through to the end of this video, and I will, in the meantime, talk about the Aquarius full moon. It's a big event because there's so many things happening that are very important, or at least the tail end of something or the beginning of something happening at the time of this full moon. And since a full moon is always an opposition between the moon and the sun, it's a culmination of a cycle. I do like to give the moon family dates as well. So before I start into the interpretation of this, let's go back and see when this full moon actually began. And you'll remember that that's a cycle of 3 years from the new moon through to the first quarter, then the full moon, and then the third quarter, and then the new moon that starts the next cycle. So the very first episode of this was the 9th of February, 2024. That was the new moon on the 9th of February, Aquarius new moon. And the first quarter square of this was the 9th of November, 2024. So that would be a kind of a questioning or a crisis of consciousness, as is often said about the first quarter or opening square. And something would relate from that November back to the February, where you already started something, where you saw something manifesting around there. And then we get to this full moon today, on the day of the full moon, the 9th of August, 2025. And then we start to move into the third quarter square. And the third quarter, or the last quarter square, is the 9th of May, 2026. So after today, after this full moon, there's going to be then a kind of a summation of a closing of a cycle, something that makes sense in the context of the previous couple of years. And finally, the end of this cycle and the beginning of the next one is a total solar eclipse, and that's at 17 degrees of Aquarius. So it's a little bit more, it's like 17.5 degrees of Aquarius. So it's just a little bit ahead of this. And if you'll remember from my video, I'll link it below, and you can check how these lunar families work. You can cycle through them yourself. There is always a slight difference of about a degree or two between each of the lunations, and that's how you find them in an ephemeris. And then they go out in the whole 3-year cycle takes place every 9 months. So you've got this first 9 months, first quarter square, the 18 months is the full moon, the 9 months after that is the third quarter square, and then finally at the 3-year point, you're looking at the conclusion of the cycle and the beginning of the next one. So that's interesting, isn't it? Because the Leo moon that we just had, which I did the video based on the new moon in Leo, the teach as a teaching prop for the lunar families, that was also ending in an eclipse. And so this is a really interesting time to pay attention to Aquarius, because it's giving you a kind of a premonition or a sense of what's coming down the long-term pipeline. We can see that collectively, or we could see that individually. So you can apply that same timing technique to everything. So whenever we're looking at astrology, we're talking about cycles. And those cycles depend on a moment in time, and that's when we mark the beginning, the middle, and the end, as it were. But it's really never ending. It's always an ongoing cycle within a cycle. So I think that's all I wanted to say about the lunar family. It's an interesting time, isn't it, to experience that kind of thing, because where we have this the sun at this full moon also is where, just 2 degrees off roughly, is where Mercury stationed retrograde. And so that's also marking that point. And where Mercury is currently at this full moon is just about 4.5 degrees of Leo. And if you go back to the end of June, 29th and 30th of June, even into the beginning of July, that's where Mercury was as it was going direct. So it hadn't yet moved into its shadow, or it just moved into its shadow phase, the 29th and 30th of June or beginning of July, and it hadn't yet started its retrograde phase. Now we have Mercury at the beginning of its shadow phase, and it's in opposition to Pluto again, because of course Pluto is so slow moving. It was at 3 degrees in opposition to Pluto the first time, the end of June. And now, well, it's 4.5 degrees of Leo. Pluto has backed its way down to 2.25 degrees of Aquarius, which happens to be pretty much exactly on my Venus. So fun times. And so we have a lot going on in terms of these oppositions, and that's for the way that this software operates. It's the red that you see there, the tensor oppositions or the squares, the aspects that require adjustment are indicated in red. The aspects that tend to flow and harmonize are indicated in blue. Now, I don't want you to think that that necessarily means bad versus good, because it doesn't always pan out that way. Often, even a nice trine can be a difficult situation because whatever is flowing is flowing. And sometimes whatever has started flowing is not what we want to continue to flow. So it's not that easy. But let's come back to the story of the full moon. So we have the moon in Aquarius, and it's obviously opposed to Leo sun. And so we're looking at a very, very strong sun, and we're looking at a moon that is a little bit dry, a little bit dried out, and not in its happy place necessarily, although it's in a social place, because Aquarius is an air sign, loves to be social up to a point because it's ruled by Saturn. So Saturn is playing some majorly outsized role at this time, because not only is it in conjunction with Neptune and retrograding in the almost in the last degree of Aries, but it's also being opposed by Mars. And so Mars is really, really strong in this story for a couple of reasons. Mars is ruling that Saturn, it's ruling Neptune, it's ruling Chiron, and it's ruling Eris, which is with Chiron. But Saturn itself we can call that a bit of a cooperative opposition. So generally speaking, Mars and Saturn are one of the most challenging oppositions that you could imagine in astrology, especially in terms of the 7 classical planets. Um, but the fact that Saturn itself is the exaltation ruler of Libra, and Mars itself is the ruler of Aries, where Saturn is, gives them a kind of a mutuality that supports each other. So we're looking at an opposition, but there's also something here that, similar to the theme of the opposition between the moon in Aquarius and the sun in Leo, is talking about reconsidering options in the dynamic of relationships, or in the dynamic of what is important for oneself compared to the collective or the couple or the relational quality. So let's continue. We're going to try and parse this out. There's so many different things to say about this that it just requires a little bit of reflection. If we just look at the Aquarius and Leo axis, and by the way, I did a video 3 years ago at the time of the Aquarius full moon, where I worked in a notion of because Saturn was actually there at the time. Saturn was still in Aquarius at that time. It was August 2022. It was even more Saturnian. And so I worked in a bit of a discussion around Stoicism. And I'm going to post that video down below that allows you to reflect on that notion of Stoicism, because this is, I think, something that can bring a kind of a tool for resilience for our times. So Stoicism is all about being resilient, and that actually is a very strong theme in Aquarian energy as well. So the dynamic between Leo and Aquarius is about integrity. So the notion of the sun as the source of our light, the source of life, the source of everything in our solar system, aptly named the solar system, is where you get that sense of continuity. You say you're going to do it, you're doing it. You show up, you do the thing. When there's some damaging aspect, then we can say, okay, well, maybe not, or maybe there's some reason why that's not working out. But on its own, the quality of Leo, the quality of the sun is integrity. It's about showing up and not caring about other people's opinions on things, not worrying about accolades. That is in the most sort of basic assumption of the action of the sun in Leo. It just knows that it's there, it's doing its thing, and it's radiating without waiting for anybody to thank it. And the moon in Aquarius is very different, and that Aquarian energy is very Saturnian. And so the moon represents our connection on an emotional level. And because it's ruled by Saturn, that can feel a little bit hesitant, or it can feel a little bit stifled, a little bit dried out. And so the moon in Aquarius tends to be much more intellectual. It's an air sign, so that's definitely part of that. And it's all about communication and connection. But in the Aquarian way of connecting, it's a connection that is a little bit guarding its distance. So it's not going to be the jolly, friendly, cheerful, and flexible Gemini, which is a mutable sign. And it's not going to be the deeply affectionate and really craving connection of Libra, which is why it's so hard for Mars to find itself in Libra, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But it's really about this connection of structure. It's about where I fit into the collective, or where I fit into this community. How do I feel in this community, this society, this club, whatever it is? And so there's always a structure with the Saturnian quality, and there's always a sense of limits. And with Aquarius, one of the things that I like to use to describe it, a way of describing Aquarian energy, is that they are deeply humanitarian, care a lot about humanitarianism or humanity, but don't like humans. And this is the description of the Saturn-ruled Aquarius. If we go to the Uranian-ruled Aquarius, which many modern astrologers do, I prefer Saturn to work with the traditional rulers. But then there's the quirkiness, the quirky aspect. But Saturn itself is already the outcast. It's already the marginal one. It's already the misfit. And so it already plays that role of rulership of Aquarius. So, so there we have these two very different forces, which is the sun that just shows up, knows that it has something to do, it has a purpose, it has quite literally the definition of purpose, which is the solar component of any natal chart. And then the moon in Aquarius, which is a little bit more shy or reticent or not so willing to give away its intimate qualities, its more tender qualities, its emotional qualities. So at first glance, this is an unaspected full moon, which is pretty rare. Usually the moon, because it's somehow engaging in some trigger point throughout the dynamic of the chart, it's often connected to something. And usually a full moon especially has twice the chance to connect with something else in the chart. And in this case, not really, except if we consider, and this comes back to our discussion that I had with Bukola a couple of weeks ago, which I invite you to listen to again. I'll put that link in the description box. We've still got Vesta in Scorpio, and Vesta has been there since the very beginning of January, like the 2nd of January, and Vesta continues to be in Scorpio all the way through the 13th of September. So Vesta was retrograding much of this time, which is why it took so long to get just to this point of Scorpio. But there's kind of 6 more weeks left to have Vesta here in Scorpio, and it happens to be creating a less than 1 degree square. It's a really significant square here. I guess it's actually, for those of you who follow these things, it's 1 degree and 2 arc minutes of a degree, just for the Virgos in the crowd. And so that is actually quite interesting, because again, we're looking at this quality of fitting in and what is my purpose. And Vesta is all about that spiritual purification, spiritual purpose. And you could also call it a sexual purification as well, with reference to Scorpio. Especially because the ruler of Scorpio is in Libra. That might be one way of looking at that. But it's more about the personal spiritual growth and how we work through the dross, the stuff that we collect over a lifetime, the things that we collect that we're potentially ashamed of, potentially angry that we did, or upset that we experienced, and we work our way through that. And here we have, with that Leo and the opposition, the Leo sun and the opposition of the moon in Aquarius, here we have that brilliant opportunity to really reflect without too much emotion on our experience of our self within society, or our self within the groups and associations that we have, our self within the bigger picture of humanity, and what is the role that we feel is comfortable for us. So obviously Pluto is there with the moon. It's what we call a co-presence. So it's let's say in Indian astrology, they would give that a conjunction, but I would tend to want to have a conjunction be a little bit closer before it becomes something really motivating, but it's still within about roughly 15 degrees. And and so that matters. It's still something that's important and that we can consider, especially because there is so much involving Pluto at the moment in what's going on. Pluto is in a trine to this Mars that is in opposition to that Saturn that's ruling the lunation. And of course, it's also in opposition to, it's in a, sorry, in a sextile to that Saturn and Neptune, and Pluto is also in a trine to Aquarius, sorry, to Uranus, which of course is the modern ruler of Aquarius. And so we have this grand air trine that is being provoked by Mars in a way that's extremely potent at this time. So there's something we need to think about differently, something we need to take action on differently in terms of our relating, in terms of the way that we relate. If we just take the mini grand trine, which is the trine that's taking place between Pluto and Uranus, and then the sextile that goes with that, Neptune and Saturn conjunction, sextiling the two, what we see formed with that Mars is the cap that creates what's called a kite. So we have the grand trine, and then we have the mini grand trine. And if you add the two together, and if the degrees add up to not too much more than a degree or so away from each other, you have a very strong chart pattern, which is called a kite. And a kite is really difficult to manage because, as you can see from the chart, there's a lot going on. There's an awful lot of stuff happening that needs to be balanced at one time. And so with all of those moving parts, quite literally, it's difficult to actually find one's way through. And the way through this dynamic is the opposition point, which is the backbone of the kite, which is the Mars opposite Saturn. And of course, we have to include Neptune too, but we want to really focus on the Mars opposite Saturn, which is the closest opposition. So there's something here that is about being resilient. And it's that, again, the stoicism that I mentioned before, which is taking action in a way that that requires some adjustment of attitude. So Saturn already is not comfortable in Aries, and yet it's getting a hand from Mars, which is where Saturn is exalted. So it's almost like they're sharing each other's energy to help each other out of this sticky, uncomfortable situation. And the fact that Pluto is in opposition or is being opposed by Mercury again and again since the end of June, we're really asked to reflect on these things. Those are retrogradations. That means that there's something that's already been on our mind, something that's already been kind of on the verge of communicating, on the verge of being looked into or explored or dealt with. And now we have to really figure out what's next. So Mercury will be stationing direct on the 11th of August, which means that Mercury is already very, very slow. It's already virtually at the place that it's going to station, and it means that that intensifies the opposition that it has with Pluto, which is even more slow and hangs out at the same degree point for basically 2 years. Not that it's doing so in this particular period, but you get what I'm saying. It's coming back and forth very, very slowly, and where Pluto might change a few minutes of a degree per month, Mercury is dashing back and forth through a sign in a month. So the fact that Mercury is also slow is telling us something that it's worth us being a little methodical, a little bit to slow down and be methodical about how we approach this new dynamic. Now, if we look at that and broaden the degree, like I said earlier with the kite, we can see that pattern really, really strongly here. The blue lines are showing this kite because it's really tight. It's all within a half of a degree roughly of each other, maybe almost a full degree, but it's really, really tight. So let's come back to that Mars with the opposition to Saturn and Neptune. And again, as I said, there's cooperation there, even in the opposition. So both are uncomfortable, but both have a sense of what the other is going through and can help each other out. And when Mars comes into Libra, it's not very assertive. And often what can happen is the energy gets repressed, and a repressed Mars gets a little crabby, and it feels frustrated that it's not able to take action. And so that anger needs to go somewhere. It requires a channel. So that can be about dealing with relationship stuff in a way that's pragmatic, trying to understand where perhaps there's been a disillusionment in terms of what one thought one could expect about what is achievable on your own. This is the Aries dynamic of let me do it, let me go and let's go for this new thing. And because we've got this retrograde cycle, now we're reconsidering these things. And so Mars is helpful in that sense because it can be in that energy of let's try and figure this way out. Let's try and negotiate this thing. And that's again why Saturn does so well in Libra, because it's like let's work through this. Let's take some time. But Mars is very impatient. And especially because Mars is ruling this Neptune and Saturn, which are retrograde, we can feel very impatient in terms of what it is that we want, what we expect. And this Mercury can have the same kind of flavor, but in a slightly different way because it's a little bit selfish. The fire signs can carry a certain self-centeredness, and it can be a little bit selfish, but now needs to reconsider what it thought was its own priority or good for itself. Of course, we're talking about ourselves, right? So what we thought might be good, but then turns out to be something we really need to look at again. And is this working for everybody else? So at the end of the day, we do need to factor in what is appropriate for the collective, for everybody else. And this is fundamentally what we're looking at here with this full moon in Aquarius. And so this tension that is there, whether it be through Mercury and Pluto, or through Mars and Saturn, or through the moon and the sun, is part of this whole bigger dialogue that we're experiencing collectively, which says something needs to give, something needs to change. We're not able to continue this way. So who's ruling Mars? It's Venus. And we're now on the verge of this absolutely beautiful and almost like celestial the savior event, which is that Venus is coming along to join Jupiter. And they are 3-ish degrees conjoined. So that's starting to become a really tight conjunction already on the 9th. And then 10th, 11th, and 12th, they really get tight in their conjunction. And basically on the 11th and 12th, they're essentially conjoined in that they perfect the conjunction. Now, this is really nice because actually it's part of what also is softening the blow of both the Mars tension here, as well as the lunar tension, which can have us feeling a little bit hesitant about how we fit into the whole picture and what we should be feeling about what's going on now. Part of the air energy with the moon, whatever air sign it is that there's a detachment. Air tends to separate and detach in a way that creates a distance. And that creates a certain intellectualization around what's going on, and it dries out the feeling nature of the moon. And one of the good things about that is that we can be a bit more rational about emotions. And in the same way, that can be too much rationality, which means that we detach and we become less and less interested in what's going on with other people. Um, Globally, we really can't afford to be like that anymore. And I think this is also what is so beautiful about this Venus Jupiter coming together in the moon's sign of Cancer, offering this opportunity for deep nourishment, for a deep awareness of one's, what one is going to be experiencing emotionally, or the potential connection and bonding that can be experienced when we overcome this conflictual and detached and doubtful energy around how to engage in the world that we're living in. Another aspect that's sharing a similar bond, and I'm going to do a separate video on that because honestly, we could just be here for hours if we talk about each of those things. And I think that's such a lovely aspect. I want to just actually give you that as a separate video. So let's focus on something positive in one video. And so one thing that's really, and by the way, I don't think these things are necessarily negative. It's challenging, and I like that word better because again, that's that stoic quality of, okay, we can muddle through this, we can work our way through this, we can overcome. A very important thing to keep in mind. So there will be a separate video here, but just keep in mind that they are approaching a conjunction at this Aquarius full moon, and that the moon is ruling that from this place of what is the collective good. What is the collective energy? How do we fit into this collective picture? So Mars, again, we're coming back to this Mars in opposition to Saturn and Neptune, maybe a little confused around what action to take. I'm going to be going sign by sign, and I'm only going to take the major aspects, so because otherwise, again, will turn out to be hours and hours long. But there's another thing that's similar in energy to that Mars, Saturn, Neptune opposition, which is that Black Moon Lilith is really strongly opposed, again, to within roughly a degree of Chiron. She's also opposing to within just 2 and a bit degrees Eris as well. So this Black Moon Lilith is in Libra, which is where we feel miffed. It's where we get pissed off around how we are in dynamics of relationship. Now, what I haven't mentioned yet, and really needs to be mentioned, especially as we're talking about an Aquarius full moon, that is dominating Jupiter, which is all about righteousness and fairness and justice, and in the divine sense, and Venus, which is ruling that energy of Mars and Lilith, which is about human justice and about the appropriateness in relationships. So this dynamic of Libra is about what is fair, what is harmonious, what is just in the legal sense, but also just in the sense of righteous behavior as an individual. What is in integrity? Which again, if we come back to this solar aspect of the strong sun at this Aquarius full moon, what is in integrity? Is a really important thing to look at. And this is what Lilith gets all hot and bothered about, because Lilith is upset at something that feels unjust and unfair, when, especially in the context of relationship, in the dynamic of relationship, in the dynamic of fairness, in harmony with others, and where that feels like it's lacking. And so Lilith can be a real pea shooter, where things don't come together because of this anger and this frustration and this feeling of the nose being out of joint around the lack of harmony. But at the same time, Lilith energy can bring us to find that in ourselves and in the context of what we're dealing with, so that we can become more vocal about it, the demand for it. And in the opposition to Chiron, it's part of our healing of our identity. Who am I? Chiron has been going through Aries forever, since May 2018, and that has been a journey of understanding oneself, one's identity, how we show up, and are we good enough, and are we, capable enough, are we pretty enough, and all of those things that create self-doubt in the human ego. With Chiron in opposition to that Lilith, we really do see that there's something here that is being poked at in our deepest sense of self. Who am I as I show up out the door, as I go into the world, as I go out into relationship. So there's a lot here that's creating a sense of, I need something to grasp, I need something to support me, I need something to change. And with Eris there, in a similar way to Lilith, um, Eris is very much about chaos and disruption. It's very much about pointing out hypocrisy. So the notion of recognizing where things are not appropriate because there's two measures, two legal systems, two ways of looking at the world. It really is very clear that something is off here when we've got the Chiron Eris, which is going to continue to be in operation until early next year, 2026. Got this Chiron Eris energy that was very alive in 1971, at the sort of peak of the hippie movement, peak of the Vietnam era, peak of the crisis between the USSR and NATO and the Americans. And we're seeing that there's this raging sense of injustice and something that needs to change. The individual is trying to find their voice, and this is another moment in time that is like that. So all of the chart is speaking to the same kind of thing. It's speaking to this quality of something has to change. Part of what we know is helpful, at least in terms of the potential for change. Now, again, we don't know what the change is going to look like, but the change, it's going to come with the trine between Uranus and Pluto, and that mini grand trine, which creates this sextile between Uranus and Neptune, Saturn, and between Pluto and Saturn, Neptune. So again, that is the top of the kite. But what we're also seeing here is that at this moment, this axis between Mars and Saturn is really the axis that we need to grapple with. Saturn is about the no and the end of something. It's the thing that requires attention, absolutely. We have X number of breaths. We have X amount of I don't know, energy to use in the day. We have X number of hours to use in a calendar day. So this attitude of Saturn is the hard stop. And now we've gone to this point. We've already gone over this point since Saturn entered into Aries on the 25th of May. And we're coming back over this and saying, well, what is the hard stop here? Have I mastered something about this area of my life? Have I figured this out yet? The answer is no, we still haven't, but the pressure is there to do something about it. And so we might end up feeling like we have to take action, even if it's temporary, or we become clear what needs fixing. It becomes just so evident and how I need to go about this. And so in this moment that we're in, we really do have this, we owe it to ourselves and we owe it collectively to all of us to really ask ourselves that question. Where is my hard stop? Where's my no? What is fair and just? What is in the um, what is my contribution or my detraction from what is the greater good, the common good, the moon in Aquarius representing that. I'm just going to check my notes to see if there was anything else I wanted to say, and I think we could go on to the sign by sign. So yeah, so that's maybe in a general sense this particular week, building up. I'm doing this on the 6th of August. I've missed every single day of the last 5 days of wanting to do a video because there's too many things going on for me. And so I'm having to kind of regroup topics, and I might have to continue doing that for the next couple of weeks, but we'll see. Um, so all I'm saying here is that this initial phase, let's say the first week, 10 days of August, feel really tense, and there's a feeling of waiting. There's a kind of, this is all that retrogradation and that kind of feeling of, I know something needs to change, something needs to happen. It's that Mercury like hanging there at that 4.5 degree point of Leo and waiting for something to happen. That's also creating a kind of a trine here that although it's a little bit of a broader trine, it's still absolutely applicable. And the sextile with Mars, absolutely applicable. But it's just that feeling of frustration that comes from the waiting game. And something changes then after this full moon. And after the full moon 9, 10, 11, and 12, we start to get this feeling of movement, not only because we've got Mercury then moving direct again, but also because we've got the Venus and Jupiter conjunction, which just brings up an opportunity to feel like, okay, there is something greater than me that I can rely on. There's something that I can work with, and there's something that is more meaningful to me that I want to stretch myself into. There's an aspirational quality to this Venus and Jupiter, of a feeling of I need comfort. I need to turn to others. I need to turn to what is good and right for the community, for the family unit, for the people around me, and also for myself, because the Cancer energy represented by the moon is our physical body. That the moon is the physical body, and it's also the foundation of the mind and the memory and the emotional nature that we carry. So that also requires a certain TLC. We want this tender, loving care to be there for ourselves. So once all of this tension releases, and that's after the full moon, as the tension starts to pull away, and there's a separation between the opposition of Mars and Saturn, Mars and Neptune, which can, by the way, make us feel a little bit confused about the goal or confused about what is really the issue. We're still, again, that's part of the limbo, the waiting. Also, when there's a greater separation between the Mercury Pluto, we start to feel like, now I get it now. There's a resolution here. I get it. The unpredictability that can be the trine between Mars and Uranus. And there again, I say, a trine is a smooth flowing energy. It's not necessarily positive in the sense that something great is going to come out of it. Something is going to come out of it with very little effort. And that's why we have to be alert to what we actually want to create and what we're doing and how we're creating. So that will also separate, and that will take away from the grand air trine here, where Mars and Pluto and Uranus are involved, and there can be this feeling of a bit of chaos that is in the ether, that is literally in the air. um, right. So I think I've covered all the bases. Funny enough, I don't need to talk really about the nodal axis. The nodal axis is just kind of there. But we are, after this full moon, moving into the eclipse energy. So this is the last lunation before the eclipses. Then we have 2 new moons in Virgo at the very beginning and at the very end of Virgo. And the one that's at the very end is on the 21st of September. That is a new moon eclipse, a solar eclipse. So yeah, interesting days, interesting times that we're living in, and it requires us to remember that we are a part of something bigger, and that where we become sidetracked or hysterical or overly I don't know, waiting for something to happen to us. We're waiting for our savior, waiting for something to resolve. We will end up being swept away by whatever is going on. So we need to take care of ourselves, our emotional process, our psychological process, our physical health and well-being, and we need to take care of each other as we do that as well. I think that's enough for now. Righty ho, so let's look as we go sign by sign. I'll take this back to ours and we shall shift. Where are we going with this? Maybe I'll go backwards for this one. If we shift and we just get Aries on the ascendant, this is always for the sun and the moon and ascendant, and the sun being you. And I'm just going to take away a little bit of the busyness here. So it's just easier to do just do this assessment here without too much going on. What else will I take away? I think we'll leave it at that. That's good. Right. Okay, we'll leave it at that. Just got rid of poor old Vesta and Eris just to clear my own head. And so yeah, here when we're looking at the sign by sign, it's the sun, the moon, and the ascendant, which are the 3 most prominent or most important aspects of your natal chart. They're kind of a symbolic you, if you like. The moon is your internal experience of life. It's your relationship to the feminine or to the mother or to nurturance, to your physical body, to your mind. It is your mind. It's the field of the mind. And then the sun, of course, is your sense of your identity, your self, let's say, your consciousness, and your sense of purpose as well. That's why it represents our career as well. It's also the masculine energy, which we can relate to the father, for example, or to men in general. And here also we're looking at the ascendant, which is where you literally appear in the world. This is like the sort of symbolic appearance of self, always in the first house, and therefore it's the house of self. And so you can identify through the ascendant how you operate as you go through your day, and that shows us what the houses are in that configuration. It shows us where in your life events will happen and what that quality of the relationship to those events will feel like to you. There we are. So for Aries, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant, it's a busy time for you, and it has been for a very long time since you already had that North Node going through there. Now you've got so much more happening here because of that Saturn-Neptune, and it will be a major theme for you for very, very long to come. And even Chiron is still in your house of self for especially if you're the ascendant, but it's the first house either way for the sun, moon, and ascendant's first house perspective of you Chiron will be there until the beginning of 2027. So there's a lot of focus on you and how you're creating yourself or taking responsibility for yourself, how you're manifesting yourself in this moment of your life. Now, your ruler is across the aisle in the house of others, in the house of relationships, in the dynamic of fairness and balance in the relational quality of your life, and that puts it in a place of what can be known as exile, or it's in its detriment. And so Mars doesn't really appreciate being in Libra because there's so much consideration for others. And in the seventh house, just like in Libra, it can have that quality of feeling frustrated in relationships or having to feel like you need to take action based on relationships. And also, what can happen, particularly as now Saturn and Neptune are showing you where you yourself may not have been acting from the place that is best suited to you or in integrity, and you're realizing certain things and you're having to go over them and reassess your behavior, your role in things. Mars is maybe the anger coming at you or the action coming at you from another person. That, of course, can also be a a business partner. It doesn't necessarily have to be your life partner, but very often is a very important relationship, the important other person in your life. So a very compelling time for you. Mars will be in Libra for 6 more weeks, so you've got quite some time here to try and reflect on how you engage with others and how they engage with you and what needs to change about that. So by the time Saturn leaves your first house, that's the 1st of September, Mars will continue to be in your seventh house. So there's something that you might need to go back in when Saturn goes back into that 12th, and you're reflecting on things that you may have done, things that you've done yourself that have caused some disruption in your life. And that might include something that is with reference to marriage, because Saturn rules your 10th house of your social status. And since we've got Mars there in the house of marriage and also ruling the house of intimacy, there may have been some upset or disruption there that requires your attention. And Saturn also rules your social house, the 11th house, where Pluto is as well. And there's a new dynamic in the way that you want to reach out into your future or into social groups, friends groups, networks for work, and stuff like that. So there's a lot here that requires already, just with that, a lot of your attention. And then on top of that, the full moon in Aquarius is in that house of the social connections and your friends and how you reach out into society. It's also the second house from the 10th, which gives us an indication of what's going on in terms of money, perhaps the money that you earn from your career, how that might be impacting you, or you're realizing something about a vision for your future, which can be part of that Saturn Neptune, because Saturn is ruling this moon. And the Saturn Neptune may have had you thinking, yeah, this is what I want, this is who I am, this is how I'm going to engage. And now with the retrograde cycle and the moon showing you, kind of showing up, and you realizing something, becoming aware of this 11th house promise or ideal, you're kind of rethinking that, and it's showing you. So you can think of this as a very helpful course correction in many ways. So Mercury is also in your fifth house of self-expression, and it's stationing in opposition to Pluto, and that opposition will be um, it'll kind of hold really for the well, the full moon is the ninth, but let's say the 8th, the ninth, the 10th, and into the 11th, when it starts to separate and move more quickly away. And there's something here you need to think about again with reference to how you show up. That Mercury is also broadly trining Saturn and Neptune. They're moving into this space of a closer trine, and they were already in that trine configuration in the end of June. So you might want to look back at that and say what was going on then that might be repeated now, but with a vision. Now something's understood, and now I need to do things a little differently. And this is with reference to quite literally how I express myself. That can be Mercury in the fifth is maybe, again, the words that I choose to use and how I communicate. And especially as Uranus has moved into your house of communication, there may be a recognition of a need to change that or a desire to change that, the way you engage with people. And it can also be your self-expression in a broader sense, in a more metaphorical sense. Like, how do I show up again in the world, and how do I reach out um, into my life and into creating something? And again, because we've got the representation of the moon with Pluto at this time in your 11th house, there may be something that you're realizing, I want to share this, I want to say this, I want to speak this out, because of course Mercury represents your third house of communication, and it represents your work, where the south node is now. So you're, again, there's this question of, maybe I need to stop doing this job, or I need to stop doing things this way. I need to be different in the way that I show up for myself every day. So that could also be with the Chiron, Saturn, Neptune in your first house, a recognition of how you need to take better care of yourself, or operate day by day to get to where you want to go. Which brings me to the next feature, which is very supportive of that, which is that Venus and Jupiter are in your fourth house. And that's a wonderful place to have this experience of Venus and Jupiter coming together, because that's your house of your inner security, your sense of self, and what you need to be happy, how you want to express that happiness is the fifth house. That's where the Mercury is taking care of things, and where the Sun is. And where you feel that, and where you sense that need for security, that's where Cancer is in your chart, and where we find Venus and Jupiter coming together. And they're with Sirius, but I'll do that. So the fixed star, Sirius. Um, I will do a video about that in a separate video. So that in and of itself is very interesting, especially if you have anything at, say, 12, 13, 14, 15 degrees, maybe even just into 16 degrees of Cancer. This is even more interesting for you. But it's a very auspicious indicator of an opportunity for you to really take care of your well-being, take care of the foundation of your life, to take care of your family, to take care of what makes you feel connected to something that is of a lineage, or of a connection to an early childhood experience, especially as Uranus is going into that third house of your extended family, and early childhood experiences and education and so on. So something is stirring in you in a different way, in a new way here. Um, but your ruler is a very big feature of this time. And so something about relationships requires a lot of your attention, that is coming directly through you taking responsibility for something that you've become aware of since the end of May. And so now you have this opportunity with Jupiter and Venus to do something that actually can be really beneficial. Venus is ruling the Mars, rules your seventh house. Venus rules your finances as well, second house. So again, if this is something to do with income or finances or whatever, that can also be very harmonious. It's a great time if you need to sell property, for example. This can be a really good time to put things on the market, or to manage things like that, because you could actually benefit a lot from that. Um, or if you wanted to buy a property, you would find something, you would settle into something in a way that is very comfortable, that feels very appropriate for you. And that would be a really lovely start to a new home life. I think that just about covers it for you, Aries. There will be another video coming tomorrow, hopefully on Jupiter's day. At the latest, it'll be on Venus's day, to talk about this Venus and Jupiter conjunction. So I will continue that discussion more in depth then. And for now, do glean as much as you can from understanding what this full moon is showing you in your 11th house of your future. Whatever is going on, whatever needs tweaking and changing, is going to be a reflection of what comes down the pipeline for you in a broader sense. And is this what you want? Is this what you're up for? Is that what you really want? And keeping in mind that this lunar family extends to conclude finally at a total solar eclipse on the 6th of February 2027. So this is a long project. There's another 18 months of engagement here that is showing you something already about what is going to be coming down for big change in 18 months' time. All right, good luck with that, and I will see you in the next video. Taurus, this full moon is showing up at the top of your chart. It's the 10th house for you, the house of your social reputation and your ambition, the legacy that you want to leave even. I don't get much sleep these days. The moon is your exaltation ruler, so that's really interesting for Taurus, and so always interesting for you also to keep an eye on that, and to sense that lunar quality of the moment, because that can also be a real comfort to Taurus as well. Whether it's your sun, moon, or ascendant, it doesn't matter. The moon is still your exaltation ruler. If you have a moon in Taurus, then this is you have that exalted moon, but it still matters what the moon is doing elsewhere. And so this lunation is showing you something about that role, perhaps of patriarch, matriarch, how you're showing up for your family, or how your parents are. Maybe it's reflecting something about your parents and the role that they're playing in your life, or their situation, their status. But if it's just about you, it's about yours, about your status, about that change in the dynamic of the ambitions and the plans that you have for your way of showing up out in the world. So this can be your work, it can be a career related thing, but it's not only that, it's the social status, meaning that can also represent your marriage, for example, or that you're cohabiting or something along those lines, or that you become a parent, or that you are now an empty nester, or those kinds of things. Am I single? Am I divorcing? And whatever. All of those things are 10th house aspects of our way that people see us outside of the home. It's about legacy as well. That can be a financial legacy, it can be your legacy in terms of the work that you create and the things that you do. So all of this is taking shape at the time of this full moon in the backdrop of Pluto already having been there for some time, where you've already been really looking at these things. And since Uranus is in your second house only for about a month, because it went in there on the 7th of July, and in a trine to Pluto, and also in a trine to Mars in your sixth house of work. Um, there may be something here about income, or about your values, about your family, about what it is that you need to do, how you need to contribute. So Mars is in the house of service, it's in the house of work, also illness and challenges to health, or obstacles to overcome. So when Mars goes into the sixth house, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, because Mars can provoke health issues. It can, and I'm not suggesting you're all going to get sick. It's just to say, it's for some of you, if Mars is provoking health issues, it can be things along the lines of inflammation, or issues that are kind of coming to a head. They're suddenly becoming very important, that you shouldn't ignore, because partly because of that opposition between Saturn and Neptune to Mars at this time is showing you something about what might be hidden, and that what needs acting upon. That can be something to really pay attention to, and that might be somebody else's health issue that you need to pay attention to, for example. Um, if there is a health issue here, there's a lot of support for resolving it, not only because of the determination of Mars as it's in the sixth house, but also because Venus is quite comfy, very happy in Cancer. There's no particular dignity for Venus in Cancer, but she's also being ruled by this moon at the 10th, in the 10th house. So there can be something quite helpful about that. The moon is in a really prominent place at this time, and the moon represents the body as well, and is, remember, the exaltation ruler for Taurus. So Venus being Taurus's ruler, ruling also the sixth house. So can be a really auspicious time to overcome some issue that needs your attention. Now, sixth house is full of where all of the challenges are. It's where all of the things that we don't like are in the sixth house. So the sixth is the 12th from the 7th. It's everything that takes away from being contented in relationship with another. So this notion of Mars being 12th from the house that it rules is part of the problematic nature of Mars in Libra, not only the fact that it's in opposition or exile to where it actually belongs, where it's actually at home. So that means that there might be conflicts around contracts or some issues of money or something like that that requires some resolution, but it can be resolved. And especially as the days move on from the full moon and towards that Venus conjoining Jupiter, that will also bring you some benefit. Jupiter rules your eighth house of other people's money, and it also rules the 11th house of your connection to what might be great gains in money, or things that kind of fall in place in a way that is really helpful. That's also including friends, and the North Node is there, so um, already quite a focus of this time for you. Issues around connecting with people, with friends, and with a vision for your future is a really big part of this story. So if there are issues that are about the ho-hum stuff around work, or about being frustrated at your job, for example, this can also be part of that dynamic where you realize, no, I can't take this anymore. I need to take action. Um, and indeed, that Mars in opposition to Saturn, Mars in poor dignity in the sixth house in opposition to Saturn, is kind of a take this job and shove it sort of energy. But I would suggest that you hold on. Don't fire off that email over the weekend. Hold on and see what's changing as the opposition weakens, and see how you might find a better resolution to things. Um, Again, Saturn is ruling this lunation, ruling your 10th house, ruling your 9th house of what am I here for? What am I doing? And there's a real reflection in terms of a sense of your inner motivations as well at this time with Neptune and Saturn in the 12th. Um, so this can also maybe reflect a sense of being more internally focused. That's the Sun and Mercury in your fourth house, especially after completing now this Mercury retrograde in the fourth house, and the Venus and Jupiter in your third. So really focusing in on taking care of things in a very intimate way. Um, and perhaps also getting great support from friends and extended family to do so as well. Um, so a really lovely time, I think, to think about yourself in terms of self-care, in terms of where it is that you really feel comfortable. And in that Taurian way, people often make fun of Taurus for not wanting to change, but it's really about understanding comfort in the greatest sense of, if I'm here for the long haul, I need to take good care of my health. And if I just give you an example, and this is not to say this is for everybody, but my mother has a Taurus sun, and she has not really been taking care of her health for a long time. She has this more sort of wishful thinking approach around things. It'll be like sort of mañana, and we're seeing a heavy price currently being paid for that, and it means that she's unable to move around. And so you know, uh, I was a yoga therapist for a very long time, and all I can say is if you can't get up off the floor without using your hands, start working towards that. Practice squats, practice strength building in the legs, practice balance, practice taking care of your basic health. Don't indulge in too much excess in terms of food, or things that are not supporting your health. Um, and then you will find that longevity becomes easier, because this is part of the dynamic of the Mars in the sixth, that is maybe showing you what is an issue right now that I need to take care of. What is the problem? And it's coming with this opposition to this Saturn and Neptune, which can have you unclear or only becoming clear about behavior that is your self undoing. That's the 12th house message as well. So if you want that longevity and that feeling of being able to reach out into the world and accomplish things and leave a legacy that is according to what you envisage for yourself, then try and take care of even on the most basic level, take care of your health, and try to find a way of being independent, so that you don't end up having to be very dependent on other people, which feels extremely vulnerable. Right, lecture over, and look forward to seeing you in the next video, Taurus. Bye-bye. Gemini, this is a very interesting place for a full moon because it's showing you in a trine to yourself what it is that you're here for. This is another sort of way of looking at yourself from a sense of having a higher purpose, a higher meaning to your life. And it comes along with the fact that the North Node is in your 10th house, which it has been since January, but it's, consistent. It's going through there till July next year, where there is a lot of focus here on what you're doing. What do I want to accomplish? How am I doing it? And and the fact that the moon itself is ruled by Saturn, which is retrograding there with Neptune, which has just kind of dipped its toes into a vision for your future or a way of reaching out in society or a role that you might want to take on in terms of leadership in your community, um, taking on a dynamic of being somebody, being a pillar for other people. Maybe there's now a reconsideration around that, not because you can't do it, but rather because you're reflecting on what is the true goal and what is really the best outcome for you. Your ruler Mercury is stationary at this point. It's retrograding. Um, on the 11th, it will be stationary direct, but it is really slow at this point. It's in a really strong opposition with Pluto, where it was the end of June. So the 29th, 30th, and the 1st of July, where there was something that is now, that was the shadow phase of the Mercury retrograde. And now you're looking back on these, what is it now, just over 2 months of what this Mercury phase has represented for you up until this point. And in fact, the sun is just less than 2 degrees away from where Mercury actually stationed. So there's a lot here to think about in terms of communication, connections with siblings, connections with neighbors or extended family, um, how you communicate things, how you express yourself, how you learn new things. Maybe there's a realization of a new skill that requires you to adapt and learn something to be able to do this new thing. And you realize, oh, wait, that I can't do this new thing until I learn this other thing, partly because the ninth house is about higher learning, that where the moon is, or a philosophical or ideological way of looking at things. And of course, the practical side is that third house, the where Mercury and the Sun are, and also Saturn, which is ruling that moon, the ninth house, is in the 11th house of gains, along with Neptune, from what you do. So you could be realizing, oh yeah, now I need to reassess what's possible for me here, and how I do it, how I go about talking about it. Also, the 11th house represents kind of the stage, as like the audience that you communicate to, and that might be something that you're realizing, yeah, I want to start this thing, I want to start a website, a podcast, a new channel, a new way of communicating, or a new way of teaching, a new way of expressing what I know. And yet it's not ready. There's something that needs tweaking. There's something that's still not quite there yet. Part of this dynamic is where Mars is coming into your fifth house, where you realize you've got something that you want to express, and it may not be so clear yet what that is, but you know that it's impactful. There's a dynamic around your desire to show up in a different way. We see that in the grand air trine between the Mars, Pluto, and Uranus, which is in your first house. So all of these first five, 9 houses, those are known as the Dharma houses. The Dharma is our sense of our purpose, but Dharma also represents what we have to do in the moment. What is the right thing in this moment? And that's very strong in you now, Gemini. And so you can really reflect on that as your ruler, Mercury, starts to move direct. And you'll get more confident in what it is that you're meant to express and get it dealt with, get it moving along. Mercury is in trine to Saturn and Neptune in the 11th. So there is really some helpful uh, understanding, but it may just be a question of timing. Things are not right, not ripe for action. They're not right in the order. There's something lacking, and you will come back to it. You will come back to it because all of these positions, this dynamic of Uranus in your first and Saturn, Neptune in your 11th, they will be coming back into these placements, but in early 2026. So patience is a virtue. It's with Uranus going through your first house, especially for Gemini. I'm sure you're really all systems go, especially with Mars there in the fifth house. but it could be really good to just take a breather and step back and reflect on really this sense of the higher purpose behind what you're doing, which is that moon in the ninth house. Um, and the other aspect of the Mars in the fifth is the quality of relationship that you might have with children, um, or if you're an entrepreneur, to your because Mercury is in the third, which can be very highly entrepreneurial as well. That's a commercial house, and Mars rules your sixth house of everyday work. So there may be something there about work or about your children that requires some kind of assertion, stepping in, doing something, or you might be getting a bit of flack from somebody involved in any of those things. Now, it could be also a very personal, creative endeavor as well, because Venus, which is the ruler of your fifth house, is also really happily in your second house, where she does very well anyway. And then Jupiter is there, both in Cancer, about to connect. And I'll do a separate video about that. So if that is true, especially with Mercury in the third, you will be really ripe to do some fantastic creative work, especially with Mars in the fifth. You want to get that creative juice flowing. Mars in the fifth can also be like athletic performance, and Mercury in the third is about your skill. So if it's not a musical or artistic thing, it can be about athletic training and skill and realizing, perhaps you had an injury that's holding you back, for example, and now you know how to train to move things along. Um, I think that's it for Gemini. There's so much that we need to cover bit by bit because there's so much happening at once. It's very difficult to know what aspect is being activated at this time. But I think as you're ruled by Mercury, one of the things for you to pay the most attention to is that opposition with Pluto. So really being clear of your relationship to your purpose, your relationship to perhaps your faith as well, to higher education, higher learning, um, God in the greater sense of the term, the divine, the spirit, the divine. What else? What else? Yeah, and what do you want to say about it? How do you need to learn something about that? Um, think in terms that bigger picture, because Saturn is in the house of your future with Neptune, thinking insightfully, planning insightfully for this next thing, the next new thing, or how you want to reach into society. And this moon is ruled by that Saturn in the ninth, where the moon in the ninth is ruled by the Saturn in the 11th, where you're getting some information about your longer term or higher sense of purpose. Um, and while Mercury is stationing and really in opposition to that Pluto, try and go back to the end of June and see what was activated then at that initial opposition. And you should always kind of keep track of what Mercury is doing to have a sense of where your attention should go in the immediate short term. All right, Gemini, I'll leave it there and I'll see you in the next video. So Cancer, this full moon is happening in the eighth house of other people, other people's money, how you connect intimately with other people, how you connect intimately with your own emotional, psychological self, um, how you share things, and also how you understand things intuitively, how you pick up on information in an insightful, intuitive way. And that is quite natural to Cancer anyway, but also it's especially strong when there are planets that are moving through that part of your chart. And so here we have the full moon, and it's also along with Pluto that has been there already for 2 years, and that Pluto is in a trine to Uranus in your 12th. So that adds to that component. The eighth house is about transformation, but also is the endings in terms of death, where we have to recognize that things, it's the death of the self. For example, when we are single, if we get married, we connect and we're no longer single. It's no longer just me, it's me and that's another death, for example. So it's not always a literal death, But there's definitely something there to get used to in terms of what I need to release in order to transform. Now that your ruler is the moon, which is why this is so significant for you. Always, every lunation is very significant. And as I mentioned in the introduction, this is the culmination point of a lunation that started in 2024. So it was on the 9th of February 2024. And then in November, on the 9th of November 2024, we had the first square related to this moon. And now we have the fullness of that. So whatever you were recognizing about this longer cycle of 18 months up until this point, you're now going to course correct or look forward in an enlightened way, with a deeper understanding, let's say, towards the closing square, or the third quarter, last quarter square, which is the 9th of May 2026. And then finally it ends, the cycle ends with a total solar eclipse, and that will be on the 6th of February 2027. So you can go into either direction, past or future, and see how this has been operating for you in this particular area of your life in terms of other people's money, what you receive from others, and also dealing with things that are ending, need for transformation, need for understanding something, maybe from a more mystical, psychological way, and also perhaps also grappling with the family things, family secrets, family stories, family, um, taboos, whatever the things are that are not always spoken about. Usually that's a hidden house, things that are not, generally speaking, opened to everyone. And also in the same way, because Uranus is in the 12th house, which also relates to loss, and it relates to letting go, the ultimate sort of letting go, and regenerating. It's, again, these are simultaneous things, that has that regenerative quality. And so we have Mars in the 4th house to create this grand air trine. In the 4th house, it's the family legacy, and it's your family of origin. And there's something there that you can explore in terms of this, moksha energy, because the 4th, the 8th, and the 12th houses are known as moksha houses. They're the houses of release and liberation. And so there is something here that you can reflect on in terms of, what can I let go of, what can I say goodbye to, and where do I need to take action, either to get something done or to support what is happening. Mars is in opposition to Saturn in your 10th house, which is, of course, along with Neptune. For the last 2 months, they've been cruising together up to the 2nd degree, basically, of Aries. And now they're retrograding, still in the 2nd degree, but getting closer to the 1st degree of Aries, and they are in opposition now to this Mars, or being opposed by Mars, which rules your 10th house. Mars also rules your 5th house of your creative self-expression and, sexual joys and fun and children, and your creativity in general, as well as your entrepreneurial energy. So this also could be something about what is going on internally, where you are realizing something about the dynamic of what you're doing, how you need to do it, something at home or working from home, or having to deal with something, that is also psychological or emotional, which is the 4th house as well, in order to overcome something, to help to stabilize what's going on in your 10th house. And because the 10th house at this moment is not stable, with Saturn, Neptune going through there, there will be a need to, for the long term, stabilize that 10th house, but they're retrograding away from it back to the 9th. And so you might be going back to that place of needing more spiritual depth or understanding of why you're here, how you express that. Ninth house is your purpose. Um, as I mentioned, it's a dharmic house. It's so your first, fifth, and ninth houses are the houses of dharma. That's where you show up in terms of what you're here for, but also what you do every day is dharma. This is the thing I need to do every day. And that's where the North Node is, in the ninth house, which is a real blessing, especially because Jupiter, which rules that ninth house, is in the first house. And now, this coming days after this full moon, in fact, starting at this full moon, there's a really tight conjunction between Venus and Jupiter, the two benefics of the zodiac, of the planets, and they're bringing something that is nourishing and hopeful and expansive, that you personally, Sun, Moon, or Ascendant Cancer, will feel inspired by, will feel nourished by. It can feel like a moment where you're finding a feeling of relief or hope after a period where that hasn't really been there for you, especially the last few months. Um, and also the Mercury retrograding in your second house, um, which is maybe about family, because second house does represent family. It's everything that supports us, but also could be about money, your income, possessions, your stuff, the stuff that you have. And there's been perhaps a real need to explore all of that, to look into all of that and manage all that stuff. And that also becomes easier as things progress, and especially by the end of August when Venus moves in to your second house, that will also feel a little bit less pressurized in terms of whatever financial thing has gone on. Mercury is in opposite, it's retrograde at the place that it's stationed, so that's considered to be the shadow zone. That Mercury started at the end of June, beginning of July. Mercury moved through these degrees, this 3-4 degree of Leo, and it stations at this 4th degree in opposition to Pluto. So let's say the 29th, or depending on where you live, 29th or 30th of June, 1st of July, that's where Mercury was. And so go back to that point of time and look at what you were doing, or what you were considering, or what needed to be dealt with at that time, because that was also in a trine, as it is now, but a wider trine, to the Saturn Neptune as well. So there's a bigger story here about wealth, or about money that you're earning. Um, Also about values. Of course, the second house is values, your value. Pluto is the impact of Pluto is very long term, and it has already been there for a couple of years, basically at this point. And yet Pluto itself is being quite strongly stimulated at this moment, and again in 2026. So now from Mercury, and reconsidering this issue of finances, and the Sun is just a couple of degrees off of where Mercury stationed retrograde as well, on the 18th of July. So by the 11th, it's now going to start to move direct and move away from that opposition with Pluto. So again, if there's something to do with family pressure or money pressure, or values, some struggle in terms of values that are not shared, this will ease off after the 12th, 13th, and that whole energy dissipates and feels a lot more manageable. Um, And of course, there's the Pluto here is a part of the bigger cycle, this kite that's forming here with the Mars opposition to Saturn and Neptune, but also the sextile that Pluto creates to Saturn, Neptune, and that Uranus creates to Saturn, Neptune, is part of that mini grand trine that creates the top of that kite. A kite is difficult. It's complex. There's so much going on, and the solution to what is going on is really that axis, the central axis, the backbone of the kite, particularly that Saturn. Take responsibility. The 10th house representing your career, or your focus on ambition, what you want to achieve, issues around parenting, or working with your parents, or what's happening in the lives of your parents. And then, of course, the support for that comes from these sextiles. So the sextile energy is what allows us to take action. So the action to be taken is coming from that Pluto or the Uranus as well. I'm going to come back and do a separate video on the Venus and Jupiter conjunction, because there's also a conjunction at the same time with Sirius, which is there for Cancer in your first house. So it happens to be my moon. And so we will look at that in a separate video. And I think I've covered everything else for now. Um, and that's that. I do hope you listen to the introduction and get some information around that you can apply also in your personal life. So I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now. And Leo, this of course is really important for you when there's a full moon in Aquarius. That means that you're highlighted in some way by being the you're illuminating the fullness of the moon, and that represents relationships for you. So when the moon is in Aquarius, it's all about the other. It's about somebody in your life that is a business partner or a life partner or a really important friend. It's the way that you do relationships, and this is being highlighted for you right now. So one of the dynamics that's happening at this time of the full moon is that the ruler of this full moon is under a bit of pressure. It's retrograde, it's with Neptune, and it's in opposition to Mars. So of course we're talking about Saturn, and that's creating this kind of a feeling of pressure and potential confusion around what to do about things as well. And because Saturn is with Neptune and opposed by Mars, there can be this feeling of urgently needing to do something, but not really knowing what, and not really knowing what action to take. So if you can wait for a while, a few days really, and but even longer if it's possible, it would be beneficial to you to glean some information about what's happening right now and take action later. Um, because what action you might take could be something that is misapplied or working against you in even a week or so afterwards, because Mercury is in your house of self for Leo, and it's retrograde but very slow at this time. So it's basically stationing to prepare to turn direct on the 11th of August. And that station just happens to be in opposition to Pluto. And that opposition was already happening when Pluto was retrograding at 3 degrees of Aquarius, and Mercury was at 3-ish degrees of Leo direct. So that was what we considered the shadow range. So just as Mercury moved across that 4 degree, um, just after the exact opposition with Pluto, it moved across that 4 degree barrier. It has come back to that place where it was at the end of June. So we're looking at 29 or 30 June, maybe the 1st of July. It would be really helpful for you to reflect on what was going on. Literally, what was I thinking? um, what was I saying? What was I doing? How do I need to communicate something of who I am and what I want in my life in the context of relationship dynamics that are rapidly changing? So with the Pluto here in your 7th house already for 2 years, that isn't new. It's just that the moon is really showing something to clarify at this point. And listen to the introduction, because I'm talking also about how that moon cycle impacts this lunation and how we're going towards 18 months from now an actual total lunar eclipse, as total solar eclipse, roughly a degree away from where this is happening. So that will be at the 17th degree of Aquarius on the 6th of February. So this lunation is 16 degrees and 56 minutes, I think, or 58 minutes. Um, the moon is not at that point because I'm moving through the dial, so we can find each chart. But let's say the eclipse that's coming on the 6th of February 2027 is going to recall what's going on here, and it could be really helpful to listen to that gut instinct. So you've got Mars in the 3rd house. That's literally gut instinct. Find out what it is that is the appropriate action for you. Try and not repress anger. If there is any anger, Mars mitigates, or Mars is mitigated by the fact that it's ruled by Venus in the 3rd house. Otherwise, it can be really kind of fly off the handle, say things that you regret later, um, in a way that can be quite harmful, quite damaging. Mars is trining Pluto, trining Uranus, so you might be a little bit overly spontaneous, overly reactive. So be careful of that, because Mars is a big feature, a big part of this dynamic of the kite that's happening here that requires a certain amount of careful handling. Uranus is in the 11th house of friends, and so this dynamic is also the beginning of a very different way of connecting with people in a general sense. This might also be that you feel motivated to start being more out there socially, that you feel with the Mars in the third, you've got lots that you want to say, and it's related to that ninth house of your ideology or your sense of what you believe in, what you have faith in. Mars rules your fourth house of emotions as well, emotions and home. And so that might be playing a role in this, that you're not yet recognizing something that needs to be in your awareness. And Venus and Jupiter are in your 12th house. Well, the North Node is in the 8th house of intimacy. So this would be a really good time to be clear about the dynamic of relationships that you are experiencing. Is the relationship above board? The moon is in the 7th house of relationships, ruling that 12th house. This is very romantic, potentially very idealized energy as well. If there's a hidden relationship, I would take it with great care and be serious about it. Make sure that it has legs in that, sorry for the pun, but make sure that it's got longevity. And something about this might be a relationship that's foreign. It might be somebody who's far away, or if it's not foreign, it might just be far away. And that it becomes difficult then to reach the person. I will be doing a separate video on the Venus Jupiter dynamic, so I'll talk more about that. But Venus rules your 10th house as well, of your reputation, your marriage or your marital status, your social status, your career. And of course, Jupiter rules your 5th house of love, and as well as the 8th house of intimacy. So you want to be careful when they move into your 12th house that you're comfortable with what you're doing, that it's in integrity for you, and that you don't get yourself in trouble or mess up something that otherwise was functioning. So this is where the Mercury opposite Pluto suggests that you really be clear, be honest, be incredibly open and upfront about what is going on with you. And it's not to say that obviously you can't have relationships that shapeshift and change, especially with Pluto going through your 7th. That is most likely. But just don't take anything frivolously at this point, I would say. I think that's it. So, Leo, this is your annual check-in in terms of your relational status and how things feel in terms of relating. So that you want to broaden that understanding to all relationships and the way that you do relationships. And how am I acting, speaking, engaging in the dynamic of relationships, and how are others doing that with reference to me? Maybe this is about realizing something that's happening in the context of your partner and not you. So, all right, I'm going to leave it there. Good luck, Leo, and I'll see you in the next video. Virgo, the full moon is happening in your 6th house and 12th house axis, and your ruler is in the 12th house. Mercury retrograde, but very slow at this point. So Mercury is slowing down to station direct. Direct stations are always easier to manage because we've already been here. We've understood the memo. We got the memo. And that's the end of June to look back on, the 29th, 30th of June, and maybe the 1st of July, where Mercury was already opposing Pluto at this point, and that was when it crossed this so-called shadow phase, where Mercury is now stationary, and Mercury retrograded where the sun is, in fact, in your 12th house, within a couple of degrees. It was 15 degrees. And so there's already something that you're dealing with that feels like it's all behind the scenes. It's all there. It's churning away in your, either in your sort of more intimate life or in your inner life, your inner self, or it's with reference to something that you need to organize in a foreign setting, foreign land, um, or working behind the scenes and having to grapple with certain things around work, especially because Mercury is opposite at the time that it's stationing direct, it's opposite, and at the time of this full moon, Pluto, opposite Pluto in your 6th house. And of course, you've got Pluto in the 6th house for a very long time, for another 19 years or something like that. 18 years. And so maybe there's a real consideration, a reconsideration around your work, how you're doing. There's a trine from that Mercury to Neptune and Saturn, which are in your eighth house and being opposed by Mars now in your second house, which is about income, possessions, finances. It's whatever supports you, it's family, food, even for that matter, and what you consume overall. And so there may be some story here about money and a confusion around who does what, who owes what. Um, because Mercury, your ruler, is in the house of loss. Potentially, it's about donation or about giving something away as well. That's Mars, when it goes in the second house, can be a big spender, so be careful of that. Venus, however, is in the house of gains, and she is with Jupiter, so that's very helpful. There can be something very supportive coming from other people, especially when Jupiter's in the 11th, and that's goes for the year that Jupiter's there. But especially when Venus is there, it feels very social, very uplifting, very conducive to harmony in relationships and friendships. Venus rules your second house of family, your values, of money, and so on. And the 11th house is the gains from what you do. So it's the second house from the 10th house. So it's what you earn from what you do. And it's also money that comes to you in ways that are unexpected, especially Venus and Jupiter together. Jupiter is in its joy in the 11th house, absolutely delights in the 11th house, and is exalted in Cancer. So Jupiter in the 11th in Cancer for Virgo rising, sun or moon, is extremely benefic, especially if it's Virgo rising. But again, the sun and the moon will have their benefits as well. So there's something that you need to resolve about money, how you share it, and maybe it's about who does what as well. It's maybe not just about the financial things, but it's maybe about the burden that is about being in a relationship, in a dynamic, like who does the dishes, who's going to take the dog for a walk, who pays the mortgage, who pays the electricity bill, and this kind of thing. And the moon in the sixth house with Pluto there is showing something that is awakening perhaps a need for you to take good care of your health, especially as Mars is in the second. Again, that's about whatever supports you. You're discovering whatever supports you. Saturn with Neptune in the eighth is ruling the fifth house of joy and the sixth house of work. And so that can also be that you're recognizing something about an actual physical stress, a mental stress, psychological stress that you reckon you need to deal with, and you might need to make a change around that. Change of job, change of position, change of hours, change of attitude. Of course, it's always good to reflect on your attitude as well before changing what's on the outside. And anyway, things are changing in terms of your work and social status and so on because of that Uranus. Uranus in the 10th, and then, of course, trining that Pluto in the 6th. So that's a big part of that story right there. I will do a second video, another video on the Venus-Jupiter conjunction, which is also happening on the fixed star Sirius. And so I prefer to do that in a separate video, but just know that it's really beneficial, and that will impact also your relationship dynamic, because you've got an exalted ruler from Venus. So Venus is the exaltation ruler of Pisces, meaning that's also ruling not only the relationships, but also the North Node. And of course, Jupiter is the ruler of Pisces. The help and the support that you're getting there from a feeling of a vision or something really helpful, really in your favor, really working for you here. That is something, bringing something new into your relational dynamic. And also, of course, Jupiter rules the fourth house. So that also is about home, and maybe it's about settling in to a new home. My son has the sun in Virgo, sun and Mercury in Virgo, and he and his girlfriend are moving in to a nicer apartment. They live just outside of London, and they're moving into a nicer place. So that is literally this weekend. And he never asks me astrological advice. If he had, I would have said, hey, move this weekend. There you go. So I hope something lovely like that is happening for you too. I think that's it, folks. I think for Virgo, you can expect some tension, that will diffuse relatively quickly, and especially once your ruler is direct, moving direct through the 12th house, and then by the end of August, moving into your first house, I think you'll find that everything is settling down. Things are finding their place, and especially because Mercury is also your career and social face ruler, ruling the house of social responsibility and your achievements and reputation and so on. All good. So good luck with that, Virgo. I'll see you in the next video. And Libra, you, for sun, moon, or ascendant, you are having this full moon in your fifth house, which is trinal to you, which is extremely favorable. And it's all about your expressions, creativity, how you want to reach out into your life, into who you are, how you want to maybe connect with your children, or what's happening in the lives of your children if you have any. And if there's no child on the horizon, it might be around deciding to have children, to get married, bond, create a family. You've got also your ruler Venus with with Jupiter rather, in the 10th house with a very exalted Jupiter in Cancer. So there's an immense favorability here for that kind of thing. There may be a little hiccup here with Saturn being opposed by Mars in your first house. So there may be maybe something that requires some drawing of borders or lines of the lines in the sand, as it were, maybe recognizing where it is that you need a stronger no or a more clear yes before things move along. If there is an issue with the children, that might also be the case where there's a situation where you realize I need to be more firm with the children, or if it's about a project. Fifth house is also your creative output in terms of whether it be commercial projects or like entrepreneurial type activities or creative projects, then that's also something that might benefit from a bit more clarity or clarity of communication. Mercury is in your 11th house of your vision for the future, where Uranus is in your 9th house of your life vision or your vision for yourself. And so there's a lot of inspiration around that, especially as it's creating this trine from Uranus to Pluto, which is in your house of self-expression. At the same time, we're getting a grand air trine with Mars in your first house. And so part of the solution here is how you actually step up and take action. And it's not going to be good enough. It won't be good, in fact, for the outcome if you don't act decisively, or if you don't act in a way that is really clear, because there's something that might backfire on you. You might go back to the end of June, very beginning of July, when Mercury was already at this position where it's about to station now. Um, it's about to station direct on the 11th of August. It's in opposition to Pluto, and there's something to be learned about what was going on at the end of June. If you want to reflect on this thing about the accomplishment, or how you reach out into the public, or how you reach out into your vision for the future, or your friendships, your general friends, associations, networks, and things, that's the 11th house. Um, and even that is in a sextile to Uranus. And that is part of this bigger story here, as we've got that in a trine also to the Saturn and Neptune, which are across the way from Mars in your first house. So there's a big story here that is extending the notion of how I take action, how I take responsibility for myself. This might be about money, or it could be values-based, because Mars rules your second house of money, possessions, values, what supports you, family, even, especially as Venus and Jupiter are up in your 10th house of parents, and perhaps your role as a parent is highlighted, or your own relationship to your parents is highlighted. That can also represent bosses. It can represent people in positions of authority of all kinds, but especially as your ruler is up there, it looks very favorable. So it would be really good for you to be very clear about what action is necessary coming from you, how you need to step up and take this action to get to this place that that you're being guided to express. Okay, so there's this also, remember, if you listen to the introduction, you'll hear about this family, the lunar family, where about a year and a half from this point, there's going to be a total solar eclipse at the same rough degree. It's like 17 degrees of Aquarius. Um, in on the 6th of February 2027. So don't think only short term, but think long term in terms of all of these different dynamics of what's changing. You also have Lilith in your first house opposite Chiron in the seventh, and that's also this bigger dynamic here around something that needs to be expressed, that from you into the quality of how you're feeling about yourself in relationship, and how relationship might be teaching you something about your own insecurities or your own sufficiency. And certainly Saturn is the exaltation ruler of Libra, so it's helping you with this. So Mars is helping Saturn from your first house, and Saturn is helping Mars from the seventh house. So you're it's not all bad. It's maybe a moment of tension, and you tend to be conflict avoidant, so that might not be your happy place, and no doubt it isn't. But at the same time, there's a point at which you need to be honest and open and put your foot down, and that's also because of this Mercury opposite Pluto. It's really about finding something honest and in integrity. It might be that you need to fire some clients or release a way of working with collaborators or colleagues in some way that's not working for you any longer. Or it might be about appealing to your audience if you have one, or appealing to your community sort of stage, as it were, a network or group of friends, acquaintances, and so on, and recognizing that there's certain things that that aren't working. You're not into it anymore. You're not. It's not them. It's you, kind of thing. Um, or it may be them, and you realize, yeah, we're done here, and this is where the no comes in. So there's a lot to be reflected on that is going to take you into a particular future vision for yourself that is especially highlighted by that Jupiter conjunct your ruler Venus at the 10th, at the top of your chart, so this will be something that needs to be honest with reference to yourself as well. Be straightforward with reference to yourself. All right, I'm going to leave it there, Libra. I do wish you all the best here, and I will see you in the next video. Scorpio, this lunation is happening in your place of home, in the fourth house of what makes you feel secure, what brings security, whether it's emotional or physical, or like manifesting a secure environment, a secure home, could be psychological security. The dynamic around family, there can be something very powerful around the dynamic with your family. The parents, this is the axis of the parents as well. And there's something that's very powerful here that's being expressed, because also your ruler Mars is in the 12th house from you. So there's something maybe connecting to ancestral stuff, or coming from foreigners or foreign places, foreign people, or from your inner process, a hidden aspect of yourself, the unconscious processing of yourself, and a notion of where you need to change your behavior based on what's not working for you, it's not helpful to you. Where Mars in the 12th in opposition to Saturn, Neptune in the house of from the house of self-undoing into the house of illness and day-to-day obstacles and overcoming challenges. There's something here that you're recognizing and you need to take action on, that's coming from within you, or from a place that might feel like it's at a distance. Again, it can be somewhere from far away, someone from far away, or it can be your actions and things that need to be dealt with in a way that brings you better health, brings you better balance in your everyday life, for example. Now, Pluto is being opposed by Mercury at the top of your chart. So this is the Mercury dynamic is very much reflecting your social status, whether I'm married, not married, am I a parent, not a parent, my relationship with my boss, with hierarchy, with my spouse. This is the 10th house of your social status in general. So it can be about this dynamic of how you reach out into the world. And that's been where we had this retrogradation of Mercury since the 18th of July. And it's stationing roughly where it will end up on the 11th of August, when it stations direct. And that is in an opposition to Pluto, which is in your fourth house. So there may be something here that's really clear about where you need to be honest or forthright, or you've understood something that now you can engage with, now you can act upon, now you can express. And that has something to do with the career or your marital status or your um, dynamic at work, for example, or how you want to reach out into your ambitions and your goals. Mercury rules your 11th house of the future. So, what you're doing here, how you're communicating that, is both in tune with what you've understood about your goals and ambitions, as well as how you see your future and how you want to reach into that. Um, The opposition from your ruler Mars to Saturn Neptune in the sixth could be really one of the most, although it's a tense opposition and difficult, especially because it's in a hidden aspect of your chart, a hidden house for you. It can be one of the most insightful aspects of this moment in time. So the insight from the moon is coming with a sense of how I feel about things, how I need to make myself feel more emotionally or psychologically secure, how I need to connect with my family or the people in my, you know, my nuclear family or my lineage. And with Mars there in the 12th in opposition to Saturn in the 6th and Neptune in the 6th, especially because Chiron is also in your 6th house, you might be realizing where you just can't anymore. It's enough is enough. You don't want any more of this. Maybe about work and how your job is affecting you, or maybe it's about the everyday way that you have to be showing up and how you're somehow expected to show up. Um, Again, it depends on your natal chart, but your ruler in the 12th can have you feeling a little powerless, can have you feeling a little bit frustrated because it's not clear yet what to do. And so you want to let a few days pass before you really engage in long-term choices because you're probably at this point not yet clear what to do. And I would wait until Mercury is direct, moving fully direct in your 10th house, which is again after the 11th, which is very supported also by the fact that by the 11th, 12th, Venus and Jupiter are going to be really tightly conjoined. So that's very helpful for wisdom, for understanding your purpose, your sense of what you're here for. Venus rules your 7th house, and so that can also be about a second marriage. Jupiter rules your 2nd house. So Venus rules the 7th, Jupiter rules the 2nd, which can also be about money and family or about what supports you in general. So favorable, really favorable dynamic here. And they also, Venus is the exaltation ruler of your 5th, where the North Node is, the house of romance, fun, enjoyment, pleasure, children, projects, entrepreneurial projects. And Jupiter rules it. So both of them in the 9th house is giving you a stronger sense of identification with purpose, a feeling of maybe more confidence in what you have faith in, including yourself. So that Mars opposition Saturn might be that you're realizing that there's some aspect of yourself that's pushing up against an obstacle in your everyday life or in your health or in your work experience, or maybe a colleague that you're pushing up against. Um, but it's give it some time and it will resolve the tension. Ideally, you don't want to react off the cuff. Mars has only, just as I'm doing this video, Mars has only just moved into your 12th house, so it may be too late by the time I post this, but do go back and repair anything that may have been done as an unconscious lashing out. Mars is in a trine to Pluto, and that's intense. And also trining Uranus, which is unpredictable. So again, trines are free-flowing energy. They don't necessarily bring the best constructive results, especially when Mars is not in strong dignity and Saturn itself is not in strong dignity. So, but this is the axis part of the dynamic of what you need to resolve is this tension between also potentially the notion of being um, in a role of martyr, victim martyr dynamic, or who is the perpetrator, who is martyring whom. Are you a victim of your own actions, and recognizing where that's depleting your energy, where Mars, because Mars in the 12th is taking away from you as your ruler, and also taking away from your 6th house of productivity and everyday work and so on. So don't uh, don't fall for the old victim martyr dynamic. unless, of course, it's actually happening, and then you deal with it. You have to take action. This requires some kind of action. All right, I'm going to leave it there, Scorpio, and I will see you in the next video. Sagittarius, this full moon is happening in your third house. This is the local space. It can be in relationship to the people around you. I don't know what it is about Sagittarius. I always cough for you. I'm sorry. I'm just going to pause this. Okay, Sagittarius, sorry about that. I think 2 hours of talking and the air conditioning and all this is just too much for my throat. So here we are for Sagittarius, Sun, Moon, and Rising. I'm going to start again. Um, so you're having this moon in the third house, and this is about community. It's about local space. It's about siblings, friends, willpower as well, where you need to use that, or where you're becoming aware of how you use your willpower. um, Aims as well, short-term aims, and what you want to experience in this short-term future. Skills as well. What skills do you have? And so maybe there's a realization around that. All of that might have something to do with where you want to go in your career, or a sense of what it is that you want to do as you go forward, because the ruler of this lunation, Saturn, is with Neptune in your fifth house of self-expression. So there's something about this moment in time where there's a real need to become clear of how you clear about how you contribute to things in this world. It looks like, because the South Node is in your 10th house as well, you're kind of done with whatever it was that you're doing up until this point, or what you were doing, let's say even up until January. And this process of 2025 and into 2026 is part of that, leaving something behind, that it was an old thing, it's done, moving towards looking after you much more, or building up a foundation in your life much more. And so that comes with this sense of what it is that you want to do next. And it's not quite finished, it's not quite understood at this point. Um, and so the moon in the third is maybe showing you, okay, I need this skill, or I need to look into that. I need to communicate things maybe in a new or different way. The sun is in its house of its joy, and also very, very strong because it's in its own sign. So there's some illumination that's coming from this place of purpose, understanding your purpose. And here, the third house is the practical ins and outs about achieving that. What do I do to do that? And the Mercury in that ninth house, where it's been retrograding since the 18th of July, is now really slowing down. It's in the same degree that it's going to be stationing direct. And Mercury was in this degree at the end of June, so 29, 30 June, depending on where you were, where you live. And even into the 1st of July. Think back to what you were doing then, because Mercury was opposing Pluto then, and it's opposing Pluto again now, kind of coming back with a reference to reflect upon, what is my purpose? How do I want to reach out into things? What do I actually believe? What is the sense of what I'm doing? How do I be me in this lifetime? How do I show up and do the thing that I believe in? So that's very strongly pointing to all of those things. And then Mars, which is in your 11th house now, is very focused on the future, very focused on what's next, focused on participating in society or connecting with people. There may be challenges in terms of that. There may be challenges in terms of friendships or issues that are disturbing relationships of some kind. Usually these are the acquaintances or associates, or people who are in a network that you belong to. Um, but because Uranus is in the seventh, we know that you're in a phase of big change around relationships, because you've got the grand air trine in these social houses. These are the houses that bring you pleasure. So they're known as the Kama houses, the third, seventh, and 11th. It's all about fun and games and pleasure, and finding practical, everyday, pragmatic reasons to connect and be enjoying life. And all of this is changing, and it could even be to the extent that you think, I don't find that pleasurable anymore. I don't really want that thing anymore. All the more so because your ruler, Jupiter, is in the eighth house now, along with Venus. So your ruler is also the ruler of the North Node and the fourth house here, and Venus is the exaltation ruler of that, and they're together here in your eighth house. So there may be something that you're realizing, like, that used to be really important to me, but something's changing here. There's a big change. We're all experiencing big change, and for Sagittarius, it's very much about this way that you express your connections with other people, social connections, business connections, sibling connections, cousins, extended family, and so on. Um, if you have an elder sibling, the Mars in the 11th house would be particularly the brother, but a relationship with a sibling that might be a bit testy. If you have children, Saturn, Neptune in the fifth with Chiron might be provoking a need for restructuring around how that relationship functions. So it's all about dynamics of relationship. The fifth house is also love, romance, how you express all of that, and how you express how you express yourself. So there's a lot about you that is becoming much more internalized at this moment. This is really helpful because it's recharging you from the inside out, and helping you then, as Uranus is going to go back in your sixth house. Check in about your health, check in about work, check in about, am I doing the right thing every day? Is this working for me? And then it moves into your seventh house as of April next year, to repeat this same degree point. Sorry, my mom is calling. I'm just going to have to say no. And and that is where you get a lot of mystical information as well, understanding and knowledge that's coming from kind of your internal guidance system in the eighth house, or maybe from a resourceful, um, occultish kind of, a magical, sort of astrological, mystical thing, meditative thing that you're getting information from either an individual or a teacher, or a practice or a study that you're doing. Jupiter in the eighth can be a teacher of meditation, teacher of these kinds of things. Especially as Mercury is up in the ninth, it's maybe something about the knowledge that you're gleaning and what you need to remember, what you want to learn more of. Um, Yeah, so it's a really good time for you to get clear about the dynamic of relationships, especially with Uranus going into your seventh house. It's not going to be permanent what's happening right now. It's a kind of an in and out phase change that's giving you a glimpse into the future, but it's also at the same time, there's a no way back kind of energy to this. So although it's not the sort of final shift, we're in a shift that is ineluctable, and we have to be able to say, okay, well, this is the vision I hold for the future, especially because Mars is in your 11th house. Be really clear who you want to participate in this with you, and how you want to engage in your future. Um, Mars rules your 12th house also, which is again about spirit and connecting with spirit. And maybe there's something here about friends who are more connected spiritually, connecting with people who are different, who are unusual. This is also Uranus going through the seventh. You start to hang out with all the weirdos who like to do things that are not mainstream and that take you much more directly to who you are, take you much more directly to your spiritual connection. There's a lot there in this moment in time as well. Um, I think that's it for Sag. I'm going to come back and talk about your ruler Jupiter with Venus, because this is significant. I will do a separate video about that, either on Jupiter's day on Thursday, or I will do it on Venus's day, Friday, tomorrow, or the next day. So as much as I can get in, I will do that. And in the meantime, make the most of this full moon, which really seems to have you concentrating on the practical day-to-day activities and how you are living your everyday life in terms of, maybe connections through relational qualities, the relational dynamic of things, including with your siblings particularly, or extended family in general. All right, Sag, I will see you in the next video. Capricorn, your ruler, Saturn, is retrograde in opposition to your exaltation ruler, Mars. And so that's rather lovely. Saturn is the exaltation ruler of Libra as well. So there's a really interesting dynamic here that you can work with, especially because on top of that, you've got Jupiter and Venus in your house of relationships. So there's a lot going on. It would be really hard to mess this up, Cancer. So it looks like there's a whole lot of change, but that you're able to cope with it. You seem to be really well equipped to deal with whatever this is, and somehow because the people in your life are also supporting you. Now, having said that, Mars is Mars, and it is in your 10th house, so you want to be careful how you're dealing with the boss, and you might be careful how you're dealing with colleagues, especially as Uranus is in your 6th house of colleagues and everyday work and work conditions and your job kind of thing, as opposed to Mars in the 10th house of career and your social status and so on, where there may be tension and conflict. So be your rational, normal self as you usually are, Capricorn. You don't disappoint. You've got this now moon in your 2nd house of family and earned income and possessions and your values, your own self-worth. So you realize here that there's a dynamic that has something to do with money, and how you might be conversing around that, or how you might be talking about what comes to you through other people. There's a lot of support coming from other people. Venus, of course, in your 7th, ruling the 10th, is bringing you support either from your spouse or from a work colleague to your career. And so this might be a time where you realize this is the time to actually take action in on my behalf in my career. I'm going to apply for that promotion. I'm going to apply for that role. Um, I will mention something to the boss, even if I will try and do it in a nice way. So there's something here that is about creating a new foundation for yourself, because we're looking at your ruler in the 4th with Neptune. So you're thinking strategically, you're thinking long term, and you're thinking from your values and from the literal sense of, the filthy lucre and things like that. So this is something that you can benefit from in this time of this full moon. Know that this is also a year and a half from now where there will be a total solar eclipse, and it's going to relate back to this moment in time. So whatever you're grappling with now or moving towards is also going to be advancing or moving in a in a strong direction a year and a half from now, 6th of February 2027. And this is all of this started, as you see in my introduction, the 9th of February 2024, and the other dates I give you in the introduction as well. So you're really in a whole new phase of re-identifying something for yourself that is creating a new dynamic. These are known as the Artha houses, the 2nd, 6th, and 10th. It's all about what establishes things in this reality, in this so-called real world, of the 3 dimensions, and the things that you need to rely upon, like literally 2nd house is food and money and the things that support you, maybe your family dynamics and so on. And then the 6th house is what you contribute through the efforts that you put in and how you overcome the obstacles that are inevitably part of life. And also the 10th house, which is about how you show up in society, how people see your role. That's also why I'm saying you've got to be careful a little bit about that Mars. Although it is your exaltation ruler, if you are, annoying the boss, or if you're considered to be a threat to people, in terms of promotions or something, that might cause a bit of a rift. But I do think you're really supported by this Venus and Jupiter, so I don't think it's going to be as potentially problematic as it otherwise could have been. It's not like this is the first time in your life that you've had Mars in Libra in your 10th. But it's the opposition to Saturn Neptune here that might be frustrating. There may be something at home or about the home or about a mortgage, because it's connecting money and home property and stuff, that is also annoying. Mars Saturn is generally not fun. It's not pleasant. It's something that requires action. And so there may be household events, things that are happening at home that require throwing money at the problem, or it requires some kind of thing to be dealt with, that requires you intervening in some way. Um, but yeah, maybe having a conversation about money, shared resources, but also shared responsibility is part of this dynamic as well. Who does what? Um, and that Mercury has been part of this dynamic of whatever is that eighth house for you. Is it representing intimacy, emotionally, psychologically, sexually? Is it representing money, straightforward finances? Is it representing what you receive from clients, for example? Something about this period in time has changed your reference to all of that. And especially starting the end of June. So go back to this last couple of months and kind of reassess what this Mercury retrograde has meant for you. 6 weeks, I guess, roughly. And then Mercury will clear your eighth house before the end of the month, and then it's going to be stationing direct on the 11th. And that's also at the same time that we have this peak of the conjunction between Jupiter and Venus, and also Sirius, which is a fixed star. And I will talk about that in the next video. So I will leave you with that. I'm sure you're far too busy to even listen to this video. I'd say you've got a lot going on that is really in your nature, poking slow, slow and steady, and sometimes fast and furious towards your future and setting yourself up. So all is in good hands there, Capricorn. I'll see you in the next video. Aquarius, this is your full moon. This is you. And it's very exciting because it's something that you can see about yourself or identify as something that is important to you, how how you relate to the other, how you relate to relationship in general, and how that relates to you. How are you relating to you? Very important. Saturn, your ruler, is in the third house with Neptune retrograding and being opposed by Mars in your ninth house. So part of you is looking towards this sense of what is my purpose right now? What do I do? How am I doing that? Your house of self, the first, the fifth, and the ninth are for a very long time to come occupied by these big transits. Over this period of time, especially because we've got this kite here. So for several weeks, you're going to have a lot of influence around this dynamic with Mars there in the ninth, with Pluto and Uranus in the first and fifth. Those are the dharmic houses. This is about, what am I here for? What am I doing? How do I do things every day? That's the pragmatic part that Saturn is pulling in, your ruler pulling in the third house. How am I showing up in my local space or in my skill sets? And do I need to retool my skill set? But it looks really good for you because you've got also Venus and Jupiter in your sixth house of occupation, what you're doing every day, how you sort yourself out in terms of your schedule and health and looking after yourself. And and that is also how you connect to colleagues, how you connect to the people who support you doing the work that you do. Um, and that's really lovely because whatever schlepping and difficulty you might be feeling in the context of this moment, it's you're getting support. You're feeling that the work that you're doing has meaning, or that the people that are in your life are supporting you in doing that. There may be an incredible sense of busyness, especially Saturn opposing Mars, Saturn, Neptune in the third, and then the dynamic of Jupiter, Venus in your sixth house. You might be incredibly busy, but it all seems to be coming from a place of readiness for this new phase that you're growing into. And then this full moon in your sign is going to culminate in a total solar eclipse a year and a half from now. So do listen to the introduction. It's really important for Aquarius. So listen to that first bit. So there's going to be this, at the same degree as this full moon, within less than a degree of this full moon, there's going to be a total solar eclipse on the 6th of February, 2027. So if that's your birthday, if you have the sun in Aquarius around 16, 17, 18 degrees, born around the 5th, 6th, 7th of February, this is your full moon, but this will also be a total solar eclipse in the same place. And so really look at your life, look at how you want to show up, how you want to express yourself, and bring out that aspect of yourself that has been maybe holding yourself back or being felt like you're being held back by other situations, and really try and understand this vision that you have for, what am I here for? What is my life all about? By the way, Mars in the ninth is extremely constructive to a Mars ruled 10th house. It's one of the exceptions in the derived houses when you have usually the planet ruling in the 12th house from that place. It usually takes away from it, but the exception is the ninth house to the 10th house. And when you have Mars there, in the ninth house, whatever you're grappling with now, what you understand in terms of what you believe in, what you know, and the knowledge that you're ready to impart, and the way, the enthusiasm you're holding some ideal or some vision, some faith, it's going to serve you in your career. So take this time very seriously. It could be a good time to slow things down and, as much as possible, try and step back from taking action. And the urge for taking action will be there, but it's not really conducive for long-term outcomes, because too many things are confusing at this point. So if you can hold back a little bit on taking action, at least a few days, maybe I don't know, maybe a week or so, or even wait until the next cycle. By the way, the next cycle is also the eclipse cycle. So just saying, maybe if there is still any lingering uncertainty, hold off and don't take action until you're really clear that it's the right thing to do. Something favorable is here for you, including potentially for your health. One of the ways that this can show up, but it would have to show up already in your natal chart, is if you are overindulging, if you are eating too much sugar, drinking too much alcohol, putting on too much weight, not doing enough exercise, the usual things. This can show up actually, although it's benefic, too much of a good thing, it can show up as actual health issues. Um, and so notice that, and realize that there can be also a health consequence to this. But again, I'm saying that because the moon is in your first house and it's ruling your sixth, and that's where we find Venus Jupiter. So you want to monitor that if that is an issue for you. Um, but as I said, it has to already be there as a lingering issue, already happening. It's not going to start to happen, but it could be something that triggers realization around your health. The moon represents your health. It's in your first house of self, and it rules your sixth house of health. So your moon represents your body and your mind. So we could include even psychological well-being there too. Right, enough of that. I look forward to seeing you in the next video, Aquarius, and bye for now. Pisces, you have this full moon in your 12th house, which is similar to your vibe, let's say, where the moon is in this more hidden part of your experience of self. It's the unconscious, it's your dream state, it's your way of checking out and being in a more mystical or um, yeah, wishful thinking zone, where you every now and then turn to find inspiration. It can also be where you find your inner inspiration through your mystical practice, or your what you could call your um, uh, oh gosh, I can't. I'm so tired. I'm so sorry, Pisces. You're the last, and I'm a Pisces, and I can't even think of the word. Your spiritual practice. How could I forget that word? That's very Piscean. Your spiritual practice is this 12th house. Also, things that are far away physically. So the 12th house is everything that is absent from your sight. You can't see it with eyes open. You can only see it when eyes are closed, or it's physically far away. And so this is highlighting a lot of that. Part of that can also be around what is your self undoing. So the things that you're doing that are not really working for you, that can be bad behaviors, it can be addictions, it can be things that you're realizing about a mental um, state, a state of mind, especially because you've got Mercury in the sixth, has been retrograding there through the sixth, and in opposition to Pluto, that's also in the 12th, and now Mars in the eighth house of the also another psychological house. So the fourth, eighth, and 12th are the psychological houses, connecting us to our psychology, our emotions, and so on, but also that's known as the moksha houses, the houses of liberation from all that stuff, and being free of it all. But alas, here we are. And so the Mercury, which is ruling your fourth house, is in retrograde. And so there may be something that connects you back to your lineage, or to your home, or to your mental state, your psychological state, your emotional state, and it's connected to your everyday experience, which can be health related, and it can be related to the health of somebody else. So it's not necessarily, pardon me, your health, but Mercury rules your seventh house as well. So it can be the health of a loved one, the health of an important other. Mercury is also stationing, and it's stationing in opposition to Pluto. So there's something that requires radical honesty at this point. And if you look at the end of June and into the 29th, 30th of June, 1st of July, Mercury was also opposing Pluto, and that was the entry phase into the entry of Mercury into its shadow phase. And we're coming back over that terrain as Mercury stations direct, and it will actually start moving direct on the 11th of August. But it's very relevant now. And so you want to reflect on where it is that you really do need to pay attention to your physical health or to your day-to-day work, your schedule, how you're working in a pragmatic way or not. Saturn and Neptune are in your second house, trining that and sextiling that Pluto, and of course being opposed by that Mars in the eighth house of other people's money. So this could be an issue that is about finances, that is directly responsible for your income. Saturn rules your 11th house of the money that you earn from what you do as well. Something to do with responsibilities around money, what happens in terms of what you share with others. So Mars is in your eighth house, which is not always a comfortable place. It can often show up a division or challenges around inheritance or around money that you earn from people that you work with, like client type relationships, or it could be division within a marriage, division of or a separation in terms of attitudes and values. For example, a feeling of, I thought I knew you, I thought we had the same values. But don't let this don't jump to conclusions, and take some time to learn and understand and work your way through this, because Saturn is also going to be at the beginning of September. Saturn moves back into your first house. Then in October, Neptune moves back into your first house. So that story of how you show up in life and how you show up in relationship and how you show up for yourself is not over yet. This is just a part of this one dynamic in this moment in time. Mercury is trining from the sixth, where it's again, sixth house is tricky. It's known as a Dusthana house, the sixth house, eighth house, 12th house. So they're problematic houses because on a material level, they're often where we get three-dimensional issues, problems to solve, problems that are, things along the lines of illness and loss and um, things that don't, they're conducive to spiritual growth, but not so much to personal sort of three-dimensional growth. This is an exceptional time nonetheless, because your ruler Jupiter and your exaltation ruler Venus are both in your fifth house, which is a lucky house. Jupiter rules your 10th house of career, as well as your marital status, your social status, your ambitions for life. And that's an incredibly creative impulse. And what that can mean is that after rethinking how you do your everyday stuff, rethinking whatever financial issues might be there, or family obstacles and challenges that you might be grappling with, health issues and challenges that you might be grappling with, you have this incredible creative impulse that can help you kind of rise above it and take you through it. This is wonderful for friendship, for love, for working with your children, for being with your children, for having children, for becoming pregnant. Um, Really, really super. And with the moon in the 12th house, you are in a space of being more aware, more alert to your unconscious process, your maybe more psychic nature, in which many Pisceans are known for, specifically because Aquarius is on the 12th. And so this is part of this dynamic of waking up to something that you may have been taking for granted in your own skill set. And that's something that you can maybe work with, or you can benefit from at this time. Taking yourself, so that moon is ruling the fifth house, which is why I say that, because the creative impulse can come through also what you realize in terms of your 12th house dreams, or realizations that are unconscious, or connections to things that are deeply spiritual, or even foreign for that matter. Because the 12th house is faraway lands and people. The Mars is in your eighth house, which is also income from things that you don't necessarily take direct action on. So it's actually income coming from clients, or it's income from earnings of things that you have already done. Like if you are selling online courses or something, you get earnings from that. So that Mars can be both a sense of needing to develop that and really work towards developing that, growing that. Or it can also be where there's something that needs a direct action. You need to take action on that, meaning that there's something that needs resolving in that sense. But Venus and Jupiter, your favorite planets, are in a trinal relationship to you. So this is really favorable, really, really lovely dynamic that's lifting you up above all the other stuff. I will be doing a separate video on that, so you can look for that in the next day or two. And I do think that this is something that you already know. It's not news. It's not something that you're not aware of. It's something you already know that you need to take care of. And it may be based on your bad habits, you could call it, or habits that are just not working for you and that you realize you need to become more aware of. And that will be supported especially when Mercury starts to move direct. And that will be from the 11th, but picking up speed as it goes through the second half of August. I think that's it, Pisces. So good luck with that. I hope everything goes well for you. Thank you for listening. And do, if you would, hit that subscribe and the like button. I know I'm supposed to say this and I forget every single time. You can come and have a consultation with me. That's what I do. All that information is in the description box. And yeah, have a great full moon. Have a great couple of days after that full moon, because things will be relaxing a lot afterwards, after the peak of the full moon. Okay, bye for now.